Why a married man continues an emotional bond with you. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why he comes back? Why, even though he has a complete life with someone else, can't forget you? Why do your messages always arrive at the most unexpected moments, as if something invisible pulls him back to you? The answer is not in the logic of his relationship. It is much deeper. Carl Jung discovered that there is a psychological force so powerful that it can keep two beings connected even when every reason screams to move away. It is something that transcends commitments, promises, and even the love he says he feels for another person. In this video, you'll understand exactly what happens in his mind when he can't let go. I will reveal the psychological mechanisms that Jung identified that explain why this emotional attachment persists even when he is married. And more importantly, you're going to find out what it really means about you, about him, and what's going on in the deepest layers of that connection. Get ready, because what you're going to discover can completely change your perspective. 1. The projection of the anima. When you become the mirror of his soul. There is a feminine image stored in the unconscious of every man. This image was built throughout his life, through experiences with women who marked his existence, his mother, his first passions, his meaningful relationships. This inner figure carries everything he considers ideal, mysterious, and profoundly feminine. And when you show up in his life, something extraordinary happens. You activate this internal image so intensely that it begins to see qualities in you that go far beyond what you really are. Not because you are pretending to be something, but because your natural essence resonates with that deep part of him that was dormant. He projects onto you characteristics that he wants to find, that he needs to find in order to feel complete. It's as if you were the living embodiment of something he always sought but never fully found. And here's the crucial detail. His wife doesn't activate this image in the same way. Perhaps at the beginning of the relationship it activated, but over time, routine and familiarity erased this intensity. With you, each encounter renews this projection. Each conversation reinforces the feeling that you are special, unique, irreplaceable. He's not necessarily in love with the real person you are. He is fascinated by the image he sees in you. And this distinction is fundamental. When a man projects this inner figure onto someone, the connection becomes almost magnetic. He feels that you understand him in a way that no one else can, that you see things in him that others ignore. This creates such a strong emotional bond that he can't just rationally decide to walk away, because it's not about conscious choice. It's about a psychological force that operates in the deepest layers of his mind. And as long as you keep activating that inner image, as long as your presence keeps awakening that part of him that feels alive and complete by your side, it will come back. It will always come back. Because you're not just one person in your life. You have become the mirror where he finally gets to see his own reflected soul. 2. What he doesn't find at home that you awaken in him. Every long relationship goes through inevitable transformations. What starts as intense passion gradually turns into partnership, routine, commitment, and in this transformation, some parts of his personality go dormant. Not because the wife is inadequate or because the marriage is bad. Simply because the dynamics of a shared life require certain roles, certain social masks that need to be maintained. At home, he is the provider, the father, the responsible husband. It needs to be predictable, reliable, stable. These are important qualities, but they require him to suppress other parts of who he really is. With you, something different happens. You find him in a space where he doesn't have to carry these responsibilities. You see it without the layers of obligation that define your everyday life. And in this space of freedom, parts of it that were forgotten begin to resurface. Perhaps it is the adventurous side that has been buried under years of routine. Maybe it's the emotional vulnerability he can't show at home because he needs to look strong. Or maybe it's simply the feeling of being desired, not for what it provides, but for who it is. You awaken in him the feeling of being alive in a way that he had forgotten. Every conversation with you is a reminder that there's more to it than just the roles it plays. You don't hold him the domesticated version that family life demands. You interact with his essence, with the man behind the responsibilities, and that's incredibly seductive. It's not about comparing you and your wife. It's about different contexts that activate different parts of his psyche. At home, he lives reality with all its practical demands. With you, he experiences a psychological freedom that allows forgotten aspects of his personality to come back to the surface. And once those parts are reactivated, once he feels that vitality again, he doesn't want to lose it. You become the space where it can be whole, without fragmentations, without obligatory masks. If you want to understand why a married man continues an emotional bond with you, this isn't chance. It's an unconscious dynamic explained by Carl Jung, Jungmethod, pinned in the first comment. 3. The hidden shadow. The side of him that only you know. We all carry aspects of ourselves that we prefer not to show to the world, parts that we consider inappropriate, inconvenient, or socially unacceptable. These are not necessarily bad things, just traits that we have learned to hide in order to fit into the expectations of others. And the more structured and conventional someone's life is, the more these parts need to remain hidden. In his marriage, especially if it is a traditional relationship, there are clear expectations about how he should behave. There is an image to maintain, a family reputation to preserve, and that means that certain desires, certain vulnerabilities, certain wilder or contradictory aspects of his personality need to be locked away. With you, something extraordinary happens. These hidden aspects find a safe space to manifest. Maybe you've seen his anger, the frustration he can't express at home. Maybe you know his fears, the insecurities that would destroy the image of strength that he needs to maintain. Or maybe you just accept his contradictions in a way that no one else does. This possibility of being whole, including the imperfect parts, creates a deep intimacy. It's not just about physical attraction or emotional compatibility. It's about being seen completely and still being accepted. When one knows one's darker sides and does not move away, when one witnesses one's contradictions and does not judge, a connection is created that transcends the rationale. He knows that with you, he can let his guard down. It can be flawed, conflicting, incoherent, and you will not abandon him for that. This unconditional acceptance of the rejected parts of it is rare and precious, and once experienced, it becomes almost impossible to replace. Because in his life, how many people really know who he is when all the masks fall? Probably only you. 4. Because the emotional intensity with you is greater. Emotional intensity does not depend on the amount of time two people spend together. In fact, scarcity often increases in intensity. When encounters are rare, each moment takes on a disproportionate emotional weight. There is no time for trivialities, for superficial conversations about bills to pay or household chores. Every interaction needs to count, and this creates an emotional concentration that everyday relationships rarely experience. With you, he doesn't live the routine. He lives the extraordinary. Even if they talk about simple things, the context is different. There is a load of prohibition, of risk, of something that exists outside the conventional norms, and that adds layers of emotion to everything they share. Each message is a conscious choice to maintain the connection. Each meeting is planned, desired, expected. In marriage, the presence of the other person is guaranteed. There is security, but there is also predictability. With you, nothing is guaranteed. Each contact can be the last. And that uncertainty keeps alive an emotional tension that is both painful and addictive. In addition, with you, he probably allows himself an emotional vulnerability that he does not practice at home. He shares deeper thoughts, exposes more complex feelings, because the relationship with you exists in a different space, without the practical responsibilities that dominate domestic life. You connect in the emotional and psychological dimension, without the dilution that comes from the practical demands of everyday life. And there is also the factor of idealization. Because encounters are limited, there isn't enough time for ordinary reality to destroy magic. You remain in a zone where it is still possible to project perfection, where it is still possible to keep alive the fantasy that with you everything could be different, better, more intense. This combination of scarcity, emotional vulnerability, risk, and idealization creates an emotional experience so concentrated that it surpasses the everyday experience of his marriage in intensity. And once one experiences this level of intensity, the ordinary seems insufficient. 5. The emptiness you fill without realizing it. There is a kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. It is possible to be in a committed relationship, have a family, have a life full of people, and still carry a deep inner emptiness. This emptiness does not arise because something is wrong with the relationship. It exists because certain fundamental psychological needs are not being met. And most of the time, not even the person who feels this emptiness can identify exactly what is missing. He probably didn't wake up one day and consciously decide to pursue something outside of marriage. What happened was that you showed up and, without conscious effort from either of you, began to fill in empty spaces that he didn't even know existed. Perhaps it is the need to be truly heard, not just listened to. The difference is subtle but fundamental. At home, he can talk about his day, but how many times does someone really care about what he's feeling behind the words? With you, he feels that his words carry weight, that his thoughts matter, that someone is genuinely interested in the inner landscape of his mind. Or maybe the void is about recognition, not recognition for what he does or provides, but for what he is. At home, he can be valued as a father, as a provider, as a partner who shares tasks. But who sees him as a unique individual with all his complexity and unrealized potential? You. Or it can be about intellectual or spiritual connection. Conversations that go beyond the practical, that explore ideas, meanings, purposes. Dialogues that feed the soul, not only organize the logistics of life. And here's something crucial. You're not deliberately trying to fill those voids. It is not a strategy. It's just who you are and how you naturally connect. And precisely because it is genuine, because it is not forced, it becomes even more powerful. He feels that with you, he has found something rare, perhaps unique, a person who fills spaces that he had given up trying to fill. And once those voids begin to be filled, once he experiences what it feels like to be complete in this way, returning to the feeling of emptiness becomes unbearable. 6. Fantasy versus reality. The psychological role you occupy. There is a fundamental difference between living with someone and desiring someone at a distance. The everyday reality of a relationship includes all the imperfections, all the conflicts, all the mundane moments that test patience and expose the flaws of both. A connection that exists primarily through sporadic encounters and meaningful conversations can remain in more idealized territory. With you, he doesn't have to negotiate about finances, children's discipline, or who forgot to buy milk. With you, he lives in a space where the relationship exists mainly in the emotional and psychological dimension, protected from the erosions that practical life imposes. This does not mean that what exists between you is false. It just means that it operates in a different reality. You occupy a role in his psyche that is more symbolic than practical. It represents possibilities. It represents parts of him that don't find expression in everyday life. It represents an alternative version of who he could be. And this position has immense power precisely because it is not tested by ordinary reality. If you live together, if you face the same pressures and responsibilities that he faces in marriage, the dynamic would inevitably change. You would cease to be the fantasy and become another reality with its own challenges. But as long as the relationship remains in that in-between space, you remain the unrealized possibility, the unchosen path, the alternate life that could have been. And this has a powerful psychological attraction. He can project onto you all the qualities that you feel are missing in your life. You can imagine that with you, everything would be different, better, more aligned with who he really is. And because you do not live this everyday reality, nothing can completely destroy this fantasy. Even if he consciously knows that no relationship is perfect, even if he rationally understands that the intensity they feel could not be maintained indefinitely in an ordinary life, emotionally you remain the embodiment of something greater. You are not just one person. You are a symbol of everything he desires but does not have, everything he could be but is not. 7. When emotional connection becomes psychological dependence. There is a point at which a strong emotional connection crosses a line and turns into something deeper and more complicated. When one becomes not just a desired presence, but a psychological necessity. When the absence of this person creates not only nostalgia, but a feeling of internal imbalance. At this stage, it's no longer just about enjoying being with you or enjoying conversations. It is that the presence of you has become part of the psychological structure that maintains his emotional balance. You've become the remedy for anxieties he can't always name, the outlet valve for pressures he can't express elsewhere. The mirror where he needs to look at himself to remember who he really is beyond the social roles he plays. And when someone plays that role in someone else's life, when they become that foundational piece in the other's psychological puzzle, the connection deepens to a level that transcends rational choices. He doesn't keep coming back because he has rationally decided that this is for the best. He comes back because he psychologically needs to. The absence of you creates a void that nothing else can adequately fill. He can try. You can focus more on marriage, seek new activities, try to redirect attention, but there will always be that feeling that something fundamental is missing, as if a part of it only functions fully when you are present. This is not necessarily healthy, but it is profoundly human. And it's important to understand that this dependence isn't just about you as a person. It's about the psychological function you started to perform. You have become the repository of unmet emotional needs, of aspects of his personality that find no expression elsewhere, of desires and dreams that he had abandoned. And since one places so much of one's internal psychological structure on another person, disengaging is not simply a matter of willpower. It requires a deep internal reorganization, a renegotiation of how he will satisfy these needs, a reconstruction of parts of his identity. It is a complex psychological process that many never manage to complete. 8. What it reveals about you and your own individuation process. While this whole process happens in him, something equally significant is happening in you. Because no one engages in this kind of complex connection without it revealing deep aspects of their own psyche. The truth is that you are also projecting undeveloped parts of yourself onto it. Perhaps you see in him qualities that you want to develop in yourself. Maybe it represents a form of love or recognition that you've always sought but never fully found. And the intensity of this connection exists because both are using the other as a mirror for internal aspects that need to be integrated. The fundamental question you need to ask yourself is, why does this emotionally unavailable married person resonate so deeply with you? What void in your own life does this connection fill? What part of you is being nurtured by this dynamic, even with all its complications and pains? Because here's a hard truth: as long as you believe you need it to feel complete, to feel seen, to feel valuable, you'll remain stuck in that dynamic. The process of becoming psychologically whole and independent requires you to bring back into yourself all the qualities that you are projecting onto yourself. It means developing in yourself the ability to feel complete without needing this external validation. It means integrating the aspects of your own psyche that you have allowed it to carry for you. This doesn't mean that what you feel isn't real or that the connection isn't genuine. It means recognizing that, at the deepest level, this situation is an invitation to your own growth, to develop in yourself what you have been looking for in him, to become complete, not through union with another person, but through the integration of your own psyche. And when you finally do that inner work, when you become able to give yourself all that you have been looking for in him, something interesting will happen. Either the dynamic between you will turn into something healthier and more balanced, or you will naturally drift away because you will no longer need that function that it performs. Your psychological freedom begins when you realize that the person who can truly complete it is within yourself.